They don't. That is the truth for everybody out there. It makes me furious because our healthcare system is broken. People, I sent Michael numbers this morning. I think it said 27% of Americans are putting off doctor's appointments because they can't afford them, and like 23% are putting off prescriptions. That's immoral on us as a society.
I would go a step further and say they don't care about healthcare. They don't care about policy. This is the problem with the Republican Party in 2025, and it's been a problem for several years now, that they just do not care. Being a policy expert is doesn't get you anywhere with the Republican Party, and they don't care about policy. And policies are, Donald Trump doesn't obviously doesn't care about policy, doesn't understand policy, and his agenda is really just his own aggrandizement, for more or less lack of a better word. And I think that what you're dealing with here is a party that has diminished the importance of this, and so you just have the situation which on an issue like healthcare, there's no healthcare experts in the Republican Party who can push them forward on this. I saw Bill Cassidy, who's a friggin' doctor, complaining about insurance companies making too much money, and um, they want to stop giving insurance companies money, give money directly to consumers to cut down on costs. What do you think insurance companies do? Their focus is on reducing costs. That's literally what they do. That's why people hate insurance companies, actually, because they try to prevent hospitals and doctors from padding their payrolls. And so, I just think the whole thing is it's a really crazy situation we're dealing with here. That you know they have a party that just is completely uninterested in governing, completely uninterested in policy.
I think that's true, and I would go a step further in two ways. The first is I think a lot of this generation of Republican elected official grew up on a soundbite party. Well, what I mean by that is they grew up understanding that we believe a strong defense, less government, family values, and low taxes. That's it. The only policy in there is low taxes. Okay.
Yeah,
They
pretty
didn't
much.
actually immerse themselves in policy details. And to talk about Cassidy's plan for a second, because it's an abomination and people don't really understand it. What the Affordable Care Act is misnamed, okay? It didn't do enough to actually bring costs down. But what it did do, what its purpose was to make sure that quality insurance was available to all Americans or almost all Americans, okay? And the way it does that is with this package of essential benefits that Republicans have loathed from day one. It says you can't call Michael and I can't start an insurance plan tomorrow that has lots and lots of fine print that doesn't cover basic services and
Yeah,
say to you, look, we're offering this to you for half of what you're paying now. This is a great deal. And sucker people in because there's a mandatory package of benefits if you want to sell a plan on the exchanges. Okay. And what Cassidy's bill does is he says, oh, yeah, we're going to give you the money, not the insurance companies, but we're going to give you the money in an HSA, which is only available if you drop down to a bronze level
it's
plan.
a health savings account.
Health savings account. Republicans love these, but it's only available if you are dropping down to a bronze level plan with a huge deductible. And they want to erode these essential services and give people big deductibles. So that essentially you're paying out of pocket for all of your basic medical care. And the
Yeah,
insurance only exists if you land yourself in a hospital for 2 months
yeah,
or you get some sort of terminal illness. It is flatly immoral. And by the way, Michael, it's stupid and cost ineffective because people won't get preventive care. Then they'll get some major
right.
ailment, and we're going to have to pay for that major ailment.
So I just want to put a personal note about this. One of the things that I get my insurance through Obamacare. I have to renew my
So
insurance
do
this
I.
month.
Me too.
In fact, I have 5 days
Wow.
to reinsure. So I use a Oscar. That's my healthcare provider, and mainly for one reason. I don't go into all the details, but it is one benefit that's particularly important to me. Now, when I'm going to look at different healthcare plans, I it's like I'm not a stupid person, but it is really difficult to understand what it is exactly that I need to be looking for to make sure that I get the right benefit. And it's hard to shop for healthcare. And consumers are not good at this. So I can't the whole idea that you're going to basically uh, trust consumers to make these decisions. Insurance companies are good at this. Like that's what they do. They look for ways to trim costs. They look for ways to, they charge a lot of money to consumers, but they also look for ways to lower the cost of healthcare. And in fact, there's I think the argument that health insurance companies are not the problem here. The problem is really doctors, the problem is hospitals. The problem is the number of uninsured people that there are in this country. And as you've seen more people get insurance, healthcare costs they're not going down. The increase in healthcare costs is declining, which is actually a positive thing. So I just think that it's you. Obamacare does a lot of things that Republicans say that they want. It, by the way, has competition as well, right? You can shop for different plans. You can compare plans, even though it's really difficult to do so. But you can do it. And so I just think that this is really just about politics. It's about politics. It's about a party that doesn't want to uh, uh, provide benefits to people. That's the bottom line, and they want to basically demagogue against Obamacare.
2 years ago, I went through the process of there was a new insurer coming into our market, and I did everything I possibly could to compare my current plan and the new plan. Okay, is there a sucker? Like, am I being a sucker? Because this is dropping the costs a lot. And I decided, no, I'm not being a sucker. That what ended up happening, what I realized later was my old insurer was basically overcharging people, and then you would get a big check in September of every year where they had to pay you back because of Obamacare that said they had to reimburse
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, my new insurer, it's now gone up 2 straight years, and I think that the premium they've quoted me for next year is $732 a month, totally affordable. That
Yeah.
and for those who don't know sarcasm, I'm being highly sarcastic.
It's
It's
incredibly expensive.
ridiculous how much money people have to pay for health insurance. And the only area where I would disagree with Michael is I think the insurers do bear some blame. First of all, they bear the blame of driving our medical system in such a way that doctors spend most of their time filling out forms and wasting huge amounts of time. But more importantly than that, I was at the allergist yesterday, and he said to me, we do this thing in the office, and they let us charge X for it. And if you do it at the hospital, the exact same test at the hospital, they'll pay 4 times as much. And it's stuff like that that is loopholes that they've created that shouldn't exist that cost people money.
Look. I'm going to make this is an unpopular viewpoint, but I'm just going to put it out there. Health insurance companies are not the bad guys in the healthcare system. They are the ones most focused on cutting costs. Now, there are obviously examples that you can point to of them, like denying care for somebody with cancer. Terrible examples of this, and when that happens, it's an outrage. But the lion's share of things that they do is they try to cut down or curtail extraneous healthcare costs, which means they get in fights with doctors all the time who want to prescribe one more test and health insurance companies are basically the only check that exists in our healthcare system on excessive costs. So that's really, I think that's the bottom line here, and that's what I think people forget about. But like, it's so bizarre to hear the Trump people, Trump and Republicans. Say, I don't give money to insurance companies. If you give money directly to a consumer, they're just going to pay a hospital, and it's not. I don't know how that's somehow better. The insurance company is much more effective in negotiating lower rates than I am. Okay,
Right, right.
it's
And
ridiculous.
look, where Michael is most right is that the costs from providers are insane. You spend a night in an ER because you fall and get a cut and need stitches. It's like 12,000 bucks that they're charging. It's insane amounts of money. You spend a couple of days in a hospital and you might as well have bought a new car because that's what it's going to cost.
Can I?
And we need to grapple with this as a society that I personally think we ought to be paying for all like medical R&D, let the government pay for it, and pay for all medical education and take away the main excuses that they have for charging so much, and then really crack down on what people can charge, because it's absurd.
Let me say one more thing about this. I had to go to the hospital, the ER back in April because I was cutting bagels and I like cut my thumb almost off. It was very painful.
I've
And I
done
went
that.
there and they sutured it up and they put some like glue on it. It's kind of cool actually. And it was fine. I got a bill in the mail, which was showed that the hospital had billed this visit, which was like about an hour, at is about $20,000. Okay, I paid $50 to go to the insurance firm. So as far as I'm concerned, I big fan of my insurance company because if I had to negotiate out of pocket, I might have gotten it cut in half and still paying 10 grand. But listen, we got to talk about politics today because this is
Let
what
me
we're here
just
for. Go
respond to
ahead.
the one comment that was in there. Absolutely right. You warmed my historian's heart. That the real issue here was that Roosevelt wanted to do universal health insurance when they did Social Security, and they couldn't do it. The AMA and the doctors rose up against this, and we ended up with this absolute monster of a system where your insurance is tied to your employment
Right.
and you don't have portability. And yeah, Truman, my girlfriend points out to me in the chat that I'm talking about Harry Truman.
Yeah.
Roosevelt wanted to, never tried it, and then Truman was the one who tried it and proposed it, and they didn't get anywhere with it. And that's why we have this absolute mess, this patchwork system: Medicaid, Medicare, all of these different things. It's a mess, and frankly, it's time for universal health care. It's like the issue I am the furthest left on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't totally disagree with you, actually. It's a terrible system we have. All right. Speaking of medical issues, I would like to bring up a major medical concern that I have, and I think that we should be talking about in greater detail. I'm sorry, I just need to
Donald
find something.
Trump's
This is a
cognitive
direct
functioning.
this is a direct quote. You figured me out. This is a direct quote from um I'm sorry, my child is texting me, so I just need to deal with that really quickly. Um
I'll fill in while you
no,
address
I
your
want to read the
child.
quote actually.
Okay, all right. We can wait on this because he said a lot of things last night. I don't know what quote you've got teed up.
Okay, so this is something he said last night. In addition to the medical, I have done something that no other president has
Oh
done
yeah,
on three
yeah.
separate occasions. The last one being recently. Let me go a step back. This is one sentence. In addition to the medical, I've done something that no other president has done on three separate occasions, the last one being recently by taking what is known as a cognitive examination, something which few people would be able to do very well, including those working at the New York Times, and I aced all three of them in front of large numbers of so-called experts, most of whom I do not know. This
Michael,
information.
you didn't add the caps in though. It doesn't feel like an
He did
authentic.
cap aced, which is weird. But that is just one thing that he has done that is ludicrous and crazy. Okay. You know what, Brian, you need to talk for a second. I need to actually deal with something
Okay,
here.
yeah. Look, Donald Trump says things that if any other president said them, we'd be seriously worried and talking about the 25th Amendment. His rants and his incoherent, I mean, this weave thing that he does in his speeches where he just lurches from one topic to another. I mean, the charitable interpretation is that the man has ADD. The less charitable interpretation is that he's losing his mind, that age has caught up with him, and he doesn't know, like he's not finishing thoughts. He started some thought last night. It was the auto pen thing. He started some thought about it was some like it was either Biden's appointees to the Fed. That's what it was. He's talking about Biden's appointees to the Fed, and he starts his thought, and then like 10, 15 minutes later, he comes back and says, "Well, we're gonna see if they were done by the auto pen because then they're off the Fed, and I can just replace them." Which is total lunacy to begin with, just the ideas. But he's all over the place. He has no focus, and he says insane things on a daily basis.
So I happened to read the transcript of this interview he did with Dasha Burns, who runs the strangest interview session, where she interviews people and treats them like, especially she interviews a lot of Trump administration people, and she treats them like they're real serious people who actually are
Did
expressing.
you see the report about this interview though? Lachlan Cartwright, I think, had this yesterday.
No.
Apparently, she spent 15 minutes in the Oval Office before the meeting with Susie Wiles, Stephen Chung, and somebody else. And they made it clear to her that she was supposed to go easy on Trump.
Okay.
Um, that at least that's what was reported. I think it was by Lachlan Cartwright.
Okay. Say it again. I'm sorry. Say it again.
And that fits. The report was that basically she met with a bunch of his aides before he came in for like 15 minutes, and they made it clear to her she was supposed to go easy on him, that this was supposed to be a softball puff kind of interview. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody else say that, but it was reported yesterday. It was sort of making the rounds on Twitter.
Look, look, I don't. She does these interviews, and I kind of feel sorry for her because she got put in this position of doing. I mean, she obviously wants to do this, but she interviewed. I saw her interview like Trump's chief of staff week or two ago, and it's like he's just lying to you. Like I don't know. It's. I know that you have to treat them like they're not, but they are, and it's sort of weird to see her try to. It was weird to watch her try to ask Trump questions that he clearly was incapable of answering and wasn't going to answer, and had incoherent answers to. I mean, she asked him about like Venezuela, and she talked to is he going to invade Venezuela. He talked about how great Venezuelan immigrants are in America and how they all voted for him in 2024. I mean, he says about four different times in the interview because about Ukraine that the war wouldn't have happened had he been president. Of course, he wasn't president. He claims because the election in 2020 was rigged. I mean, he has this like circular narrative where he has like four or five talking points he just repeats over and over again. I mean,
It's like one of
it's
those pull
really
string dolls that used to
yeah,
exist.
exactly. It's exactly what it is. Like it's you pull the string and it just says like "I love you" or I whatever. I forget what they say, but you know what I mean. Like that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. But he's been doing that for a long time. What I think is even more striking is what's been happening in the last week or two is that Trump is now unambiguously making racist statements. I mean, he always has made
Yeah. Oh
obliquely
God,
racist
yes.
statements, but he's gone completely off the deep end. I mean, interesting
Yeah.
last night that so 4 years ago, there was a story about how he apparently called African countries shithole countries and said, why can't we
It,
have
it,
people?
it was 7 years ago, I think.
No, no, no. It
It,
was was it that long ago? It was a while ago. It was a while
it
ago.
was
Yeah,
during his
you're right.
first
It was more than
presidency.
four. You're right. It was more than 4 years ago. Sorry. And thank you, Carl. Pull the string and says it's not Joe Biden. It's Joe Biden's fault. Right. Um, and by the way, just for the record, in this interview, he repeatedly calls Biden stupid, says he was corrupt. I mean, the way he talks about his predecessor, it's disgusting. But anyway, let
He
me get
he
back to
polled people on that yesterday at his rally.
yes, right.
Should we call him sleep? Should we call him? I mean, he's just a vicious human being.
Vicious human being. But let me get back to the racist thing. So he apparently called these African countries shithole countries and said, why can't we have more immigrants from Sweden and Norway? Which is unambiguously racist.
Did
And
I
at the
freeze? Did you
time,
freeze?
oh, I'm still here. At the time, uh, he his administration denied that he made these statements and called it fake news, what have you. Yesterday, in the speech in Pennsylvania, he basically admitted it that he had said this. And the thing that's interesting, I think, what's different about his first presidency to his second presidency is that he is now just saying the quiet part loud. He's not even afraid to say anymore incredibly racist statements. The way he talks about Ilhan Omar, the way he talks about Somalis. I mean, I get these things it's now become an epidemic in my Twitter feed about people saying Somalia is the most corrupt country in the world and they have female genital mutilation. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's why they want to come here. And if you know anything about Somalis in America, they're actually great immigrants. They integrate in the country. I know in Minnesota, there's a beloved community there. I mean, it's just crazy. I used to go to Minnesota a lot. I always thought it was weird that of all the places the Somalis would go to, they went to the coldest place in America. Must have been quite a culture shock to go from
I'll go to
Somalia.
Minnesota. I'll go to Minnesota in July.
Yeah,
Not in the
actually,
winter.
Minnesota in the summer is lovely. It's really nice there. The winter is what's awful, but it's really nice in the summer. It's kind of mild and it's just beautiful there. But I mean, he is and he made these comments he makes about Somalians, how they're all terrible and they're all corrupt and they all should go back to their country. I mean, this is like kind of stuff you'd expect like at a bar stool in 1971 in like Boston or New York or New York City or something.
He's Archie
There's no
Bunker, is what he is.
He's Archie Bunker. But the thing that's most disturbing is that he gives this incredibly racist rant, and everyone in the audience at this event just cheers along with him. They're laughing. They think it's funny. I mean, he is empowering
They
the
were
worst
chanting "Send her back"
sender.
about
Thank
Elon
you.
Omar
Yeah.
yesterday.
So it is a really just awful situation that we're in this country with the president who is just openly, you know, attacking people of color, not to mention what's happening with these deportations, obviously. So I just
I
think, go ahead,
I,
sorry.
I want to pick up on something you tweeted last night. I think one of the major failings of the media is that when he was reported to call African countries shithole countries in his first term, That was the story for like 4 or 5 days. I remember scrambling to edit pieces to get, the history of this out there. The media made a decision in 2024, which was the electorate knew all about Donald Trump. They knew that he said awful things. They knew that he, was immoral and unethical and corrupt and all of these things, and they voted for him anyway. Therefore, we, the media, are going to ignore all of these things. This is not major banner news this morning, like it should be, that the president of the United States said, honestly, the last president to say something this racist was probably Woodrow Wilson.
I was going to say
Like,
Woodrow Wilson, but he's the most
like we
racist
know
president since
Nixon
Woodrow
said
Wilson,
it. We know Nixon said stuff privately,
but
but
not nearly as bad as what he is saying.
no, and it was in private. If we didn't have tapes, we wouldn't have known it because
Right,
Richard Nixon knew better than to say it in public. But I
right.
really, thinking about it, I would think that you have to go back to Woodrow Wilson to find someone this
No, I
overtly
think you're right.
publicly racist as president of the United States. And it's disgusting, and it should be the top story today. And instead, nobody's talking about it. The media isn't paying, they're not shining the spotlight on
Well,
certain things.
I think you're right, and I made this point last night that we should be talking more about this. But I think look, I think there is a certain point to be made that people knew about this and they were okay with it because they voted for him to
I
be president
agree with
again.
that.
But I think the issue should be that Republicans should be forced to have to answer for this. Republicans should be forced to say, "Do you agree with this?" Of course, they're going to say, I didn't hear about it." I mean, I saw this thing the other day, and I just want to make one last point about this, and then we can move on to what happened last night in special elections. But Eric Schmidt, who is a senator from Missouri, major MAGA Republican, went on with Stephanopoulos on Sunday, and he was asked about the pardon of the Honduran president, which Schmidt's answer is the same answer Republicans always give. I don't know anything about that. I haven't heard much about it. And Stephanopoulos was incredulous. Like, you're a senator. You tell me you haven't heard this story? Like, give me a break. And Schmidt then goes into this like rant about how it's just Democratic lies and all you do is for Democratic lies. And you lied about the fact that Joe Biden was a vegetable for 4 years. That's what he said, a vegetable for 4 years. Now, first of all, that's obviously not true. Secondly, even in Joe Biden's lowest moment, he is about 1 billion times more competent than Donald Trump is right now. But the last thing is, and what really bothers me, is that Eric Schmidt is a father of a nonverbal autistic child. A child who some people, like the president of the United States, the man he is defending, have used, I'm not going to use the word, begins with an R, to describe people like Eric Schmidt's son. They might also use words like vegetable to describe Eric Schmidt's son. It is a slur. It is disgusting. What is so appalling about this is Schmidt, of all people, should know better than to be using these kinds of insults, okay, that can be thrown back on his own child, which, by the way, would be disgusting, just so we're clear. And what's even worse about it is he's doing it in defense of one of the worst human beings in this country who would think nothing of calling his son using a slur to describe his son. So I'm sorry, but like this is what has to happen is that reporters need to scrutinize or force Republicans to acknowledge what is happening. And I want them on the record. Do you defend calling Somalia a shithole country? Do you defend saying that Somali Americans should be sent back to their country? Is that what you think should be happening? Because that's the question that needs to be asked of these people. Sorry, my rant is over.
I I want to build off that rant because Eric Schmidt pisses me off more than just about any MAGA senator, and that's ironic because he's not necessarily the loudest, out there every day. But like, okay, Missouri has two very MAGA senators. One of them, Josh Hawley, at least has policy ideas. He's got a health care plan. He
Ish.
votes, he's got thoughts about how to make life more affordable and is outspoken, even if he doesn't always vote that way. Eric Schmidt is just a Trumpian troll who
Yeah.
does what he's told,
Yeah.
and he's a little toady who honestly is just. I mean, think about it this way. We talked to you last week. I think we told you about how there's a state senator in Indiana. They're going to vote on redistricting, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a little while tomorrow. But there's a senator who said after Trump used the R word, has an autistic
Yeah.
child or something like that, said, "I'm not voting for this," and maybe the
His
president can
child
kind of
actually his child has Down syndrome.
Down syndrome, and said, "You know what? I'm not voting for this. This is just, this guy's disgusting." Basically saying, "I'm going to punish you, Donald, for this. And the only way that I can get through to you." That's what a moral person does. That's what a good father does. Eric Schmidt just rolls over and does whatever Donald Trump says because that's his meal ticket. That's how he got elected, and he's going to do as he's told. He is an abomination to the idea of a senator and what senators are supposed to be.
And let me just say this too. You know as well as I do that behind closed doors, Eric Schmidt acknowledges that Donald Trump is a horrible person and an idiot.
Mhm.
They all do. I mean, there's a great story from I think it was in what's his name, McKay Coppin's book on Romney. How when Trump spoke at a SETI caucus meeting, when he finished speaking, everyone just started laughing because he was such an imbecile. They all know it, and they all keep their mouths shut because that's what their political interest is. And I have to tell you something. I, I'm working on something right now, a longer piece, and it's sort of a long piece, sort of talking about why Democrats need to embrace larger set of structural reforms to the political system. And one of the arguments is like they should do things like make DC and Puerto Rico state, or they should pack the Supreme Court. And I wrote in this thing, I said, like, some people say that's a partisan argument, and my response is, you're right, it is. It's a partisan argument because what we have seen over the past 10 years is that Republicans simply are not cannot be trusted with national power, that they cannot be trusted to protect American democracy, to stand up for basic democratic norms, basic ethical and moral norms that we've come to understand in this country. And that's why you need Democrats to do these things, because Republicans simply have forfeited, in my opinion, their right to be a national power. That's how I look at it, because I think that's what's happened over the past 10 years. Whatever you think of Democrats, I don't care if you hate Democrats.
I'm
They are just not as ethically challenged and they are as cynical and craven and gutless as Republicans are.
I'm more sympathetic to that argument than I was 5 years ago, than I was 10 years ago. I think on some of the structural reforms, I'm more hesitant than you are. On some of them, I'm right there with you. On some of them, I'm a little bit more hesitant because I look down the road and see an endless death spiral of things. But
Dude,
I do think that Republicans have absolutely sacrificed power.
he- here's the thing: we're in a death spiral right now, and people don't seem to realize it. Right? What's happening in this country right now is we've gone from uh, governing trifecta for Republicans in 2016, governing trifecta for Democrats in 2020, governing trifecta for Republicans in 2024, and I wouldn't be shocked at all governing trifecta for Democrats in 2028. What's happening in this country is that we are evenly divided, a small segment of the population, 10, 15% every year, mostly almost all localized in swing states, ends up switching the election, the entire composition of Washington based on their whims. And so, even if Democrats win back power in 2028, if they don't change the system, all you're doing is setting up for in 2 years them to lose maybe the House, maybe the Senate, and then in 2032 to lose the White House. And unless you change this cycle, like we had the conversation online a couple days ago about how offline actually I should say, about how Democrats needed Joe Manchin. And my sort of take on Joe Manchin is, okay, Joe Manchin helped pass a lot of things that Joe Biden enacted, or that he passed a lot of legislation that Joe Biden supported. How did that work out? First of all, it didn't help Democrats at all. And secondly, Donald Trump is in the process of undoing all of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And so my thing is, like, if that's what you're basically aiming for, to do 2 years of achievements, of progressive achievements, and then have them undone by the next Republican president, what have you really accomplished? You're just basically, you're in this death spiral in which nothing really gets accomplished, and there's nothing long term, and the country just kind of stays in this sort of stasis point. So my thing is, like, unless you can change the structure of the system and recognize, for example, the Democrats are disadvantaged by the apportionment of the Senate. They're disadvantaged by the apportionment of the House. They're disadvantaged by the Electoral College. If you don't try to change, and they're disadvantaged by a Supreme Court that is nakedly partisan. And if you're not willing to change those things, you're just basically like you're on the hamster wheel.
So I agree with you to a significant extent on this. I think DC and Puerto Rico should be states. I would prefer filibuster reform before we get rid of it, just because I think that it helps breed policy stability. And one thing that annoys me about the ACA subsidy cliff is that nobody in government seems to care that they keep creating instability on taxes, on health care, where average Americans don't know about the impact on their lives. They're stuck in limbo all the time, and I think that causes a lot of unnecessarily stress and anxiety. And I think that's not what government ought to be doing. We probably
That's fair.
disagree more on the Supreme Court, but again, only because I think you're going to have an endless cycle of, hey, we add three justices. Hey, they add three
Fine,
justices.
fine.
And
I'm
I
fine
think
with that. I'm
the
fine with that.
law needs some element of stability. That
It
being
doesn't have
said,
stability, but wait, it doesn't have
but
stability now. Republicans just make up the laws that go along. I mean, I wrote about this in the redistricting case. They just basically ignored the law, ignored past
that's
precedent,
no, you're right.
threw it all out the window. They're going to do the same thing on Trump firing the FTC commissioners. This has been black letter law for 80
Oh,
friggin' years in this country, and they're
I
going to throw it
ranted
out the
about
window.
that
So
today
don't
already.
talk to me about stability.
No,
They're the
I
ones who
ranted about
are
this.
ruining the stability.
I ranted about this already.
Sorry, I mean
What
to yell at you, Brian. Sorry.
what I would do is I think we need term limits for justices now. I think it's time 18-year terms so that the electorate knows. Yeah, somebody's saying George Conway said this. I think 18-year terms, the electorate's going to know
Yeah,
before
but
every
you need to
presidential
amend
election.
the Constitution to do that. I'm pretty sure.
There, a lot of the law professor types think you do not. That there are ways around it. Now, the problem I have with a lot of these reforms is with this Supreme Court, you're not going to be able to enact any of them by law. For example, DC statehood not happening. You know
They'll find
why?
some reason to throw that out. You know they will. That's why you have
Right.
to do on literally day one. You add three justices to the court, and you make DC and Puerto Rico state. That's what you do on day one, and
Look,
and after getting rid of the filibuster.
I I am not opposed to that at this point. I was, and I warned conservatives left and right. I said, if you do this thing that you did with the Scalia seat and the Ginsburg seat, you are going to take people like me and radicalize us because you're showing us that you will do anything that you have the
Exactly.
power to do to the court. And if you do that, then we're going to do that, and that's going to mean court packet. Um,
Look, they want to
would
bitch and
I
moan about court
personally?
packing. Fine, I'll just bring up what they did with Scalia in 2016. What they
Right,
did
right,
with
right,
fucking Amy
right,
Coney
look,
Barrett.
I written extensively on this. They did unprecedented things. I agree with you. Like I said, my natural inclination is to say let's try less extreme reforms before we try more extreme reforms. However, we both agree that the system needs reforming, that it is not functional, that first of all, the filibuster was something that no one ever consciously adopted. It was not something that the founders put in
Ever
place.
imagined?
In fact, they rejected it. They created a supermajority requirement specifically for certain narrow things and rejected it for other things. It
Right.
happened by accident when the previous question rule got wiped out in the 19th century. Nobody did much of anything with it in the 19th century. And really through the early 70s, it was a very rare occurrence. It was used to do terrible things like blocking civil rights achievements, but it was incredibly rare. It was only with two really terrible senators, James Allen from Alabama and Jesse Helms of North Carolina, who might have been the worst, most odious figure in
Oh,
the
come on,
Senate.
man. Nah, Theodore Bilbo, man. Come on. Come on.
Oh, I was about to say the last half
Come
century.
on.
Theodore Bilbo was long dead before
Hey,
then.
he was a senator in the 70s, wasn't he?
No, I think he died in like the
60s?
30s or 40s.
No, he was around longer than that.
Hold on. We will
I
get
could be wrong on this, by the way.
Theodore Bilbo died August 21st, 1947.
Ooh,
Score one
I
for
just got
me.
I got trivia dinged on that one, dude. I'm
Now,
sorry. Well,
he was
that's
he was
embarrassing.
earlier. He was 1877 and 1947.
Was Russell
Was his
there until the
lifespan.
70s? Maybe I'm thinking of Russell.
Richard Russell was there, yeah, until I think either the very late 60s or very early 70s.
Who was the really racist guy from Mississippi, Louisiana, who was there
You're
until the
talking about
70s?
James Eastland, who was there,
Yes, James
who
Eastland.
keeps
Thank you.
getting
That's
Biden
it.
in trouble because Biden was on the Judiciary Committee when he was chairman,
Right, and they were
and
like buddies.
Eastland used to joke that he had extra pockets put into his suit to put the civil rights bills in so they could die there. He was an absolutely horrible, horrible human being who was in office until I think 78. Was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And Biden's point was always, if you ever wanted to get anything done, you had to deal with the likes of him. You couldn't just say you're a horrible person and a racist, so I'm not going to deal with you. But one of the best things that happened was when Eastland retired and Ted Kennedy became chair of the Judiciary Committee. But anyway, my point is the filibuster, as in every bill thing, is something that's happened gradually over the last 50 years that no one planned for. It's not a good thing, and frankly, is not functional in a deeply polarized country.
No, no. But look here. Look, we should move on. I want to say this, by the way. Thank Lana for all of her nice comments in the chat. I want to just say one thing to make my point about why Democrats need to add DC and Puerto Rico as a state. So I make this point over and over again that there are 7 swing states that switched hands. That basically they were the narrowest states in the between 2016 and 2024. Right, the only 7 states. Every other state, all 43 states, the same party won them in each of those 3 elections. 7 swing states, that's not the case. Actually, except North Carolina, which would Trump on all 3. But the other 6 all went back and forth. So those 7 states are arguably the most narrowly divided states in the country, and thus they are in many ways the most competitive states in the country. Now, of those 14, there's 14 Senate seats in those 7 states. 10 of them are held by Democrats, which tells me the Democrats actually do better in swing states and do better in these competitive elections than Republicans do. They nominate better candidates. They're much more, I think, you'd say, seen acceptable to moderates, independent voters, swing voters, what have you. Okay, so that's 10 of 14. It's pretty good. Governorships, 5 out of 7, also very impressive. Now, let's just say for the record, the
And
Democrats
that's
won
going to be
all.
7 out of 7 come 2027.
It may be, actually. I think you're right. But let's say that all 14 of those those swing states had Democratic senators. How many senators would Democrats then have? 51. 51. They could win literally the most competitive and closely divided states in the country and have a 1-seat majority in the Senate. That is a byproduct of a Senate body that is structurally disadvantages Democrats and prioritizes rural states, which are primarily Republican. So this is why it is so urgent for Democrats to make DC and Puerto Rico states. Make DC a state, you're going to add 2 Democratic senators, probably for life. And then Puerto Rico, 1, probably 2 Democratic senators, at least initially. If you don't do that, Democrats are then forced to try to win state seats in places where Trump has won repeatedly, and they can't win. And so it simply puts too much burden on Democrats to win in places where they can't win and hold the places where the seats are the most narrowly divided. So they have to do this. Look, if I had my way, I would tell Democrats, make DC a state, make Puerto Rico a state, make the Virgin Islands a state, make Guam a state, make Wake Island a state, divide
And
California
by the
into
way,
4 states. I would do all of those things. All of them. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that if you look at who the delegates are in the House from some of these places, Republicans would be competitive in a lot of them.
They'd be competitive. They'd be competitive.
It would, it's not, and look, I agree with Michael about DC and Puerto Rico. My only disagreement is I think you can't make DC a state by law with this Supreme Court because
That's
the
why
last time,
that's why you have to expand the court.
right. No, I get it. But
Because
I would love to make
acknowledge,
California 4
you're
states.
acknowledging my point. You're acknowledging that if Democrats made DC a state, the conservatives on the Supreme Court would find some reason, some bullshit reason to reject that, to knock it down. We both know that would happen.
Well, what they'd say is that it was intended to be different, and Congress knew that because the last time they tried DC statehood in a broadly bipartisan way, it was an amendment. They passed an amendment, and the states didn't ratify it. Now look, I think the first thing, the
States
thing that
have
everybody,
long been admitted to the country without a majority, just by the legislature, not with amendments,
and
but
look,
just by the Congress.
how did we get to where we are? We got to where we are because Republicans in the late 19th century admitted a whole bunch of states so that they would have power.
That's right.
Michael's
That's right.
argument, I am all for this. I am all for expanding the House, which I think would solve a lot of problems in terms of the Electoral College. The
Hmm.
only areas where I think I would like to try more moderate reforms than Michael would initially, and if they don't work, then I'm going to be right with Michael, would be the filibuster and the Supreme Court. But again, I think we need
You have to
reforms.
expand the court because the court has become the GOP's trump card to stop any progress from actually occurring. All right, look, we got to move on. We got to talk about what happened last night because it is kind of important to the midterms. So, but anyway, I'm writing more about this. But the bottom line to me is that Democrats have convinced themselves, a lot of Democrats, that you can govern your way out of this mess, that you can message your way out of this mess, that you can policy your way out of this mess. And they simply are wrong. Policy doesn't matter. Voters don't vote on policy, they vote on tribe and they vote on identity. Messaging doesn't work because the voters who end up deciding elections are the least aware, least knowledgeable, and least informed members of the electorate. I mean, 10% of the electorate. I mean, basically 9% of the electorate knows they're going to vote for every election. They're Democrats or Republicans. It's a squishy middle that basically always hates the incumbent party that ends up determining so many of elections in this country. And that's the reality of American politics today. The Democrats are at a disadvantage. And if they do not sorry. So these are what they are keep coming up with these band-aid solutions to a much larger problem, right? Okay, let's say you elect Dan Osborne in Nebraska. Okay, that's not okay. He might win, but he's not going to support filibuster reform. He's not going to pack the Supreme Court. He probably won't support DC statehood. And then you know what's going to happen in 2 years? You're going to lose the Senate. Okay, and you're right back in the place you were before. Democrats do not need more Joe Manchins. Okay,
Oh,
I get.
yes, they do. That
No, they
is
don't.
where.
No, they don't. Joe Manchins are a problem because Joe Manchins give them this majority and allow them to pass things that they say they're going to pass that are popular, but that create a backlash. It's exactly what happened with Biden. He did everything he said he was going to do, follow through on his agenda. Manchin stopped the parts that would have actually really helped Democrats the most. And what ends up happening? They lose the House in 2022. They lose the White House and Senate in 2024. People like Manchin are not a solution. You need to elect 50 Democrats and a Democratic vice president who support filibuster reform, who support making D.C. and Puerto Rico a state. If you elect 50 senators, one of which is like Joe Manchin, you're still fucked.
Oh, I don't want 50 senators, one of whom
You're
is
not
Joe
going to get
Manchin.
more than 50. You're not going to
Oh,
get more
see,
than
this
50.
is I disagree.
Where are you
I
going to win
think
those seats?
Democrats
Where are you going to win them?
should be Democrats should be competing everywhere. That doesn't mean you're going
What
to.
does that even mean? You can compete everywhere. You're not going to win. You're not going to win in these
You are
places.
making an argument that seats that were competitive in the last 10, 15, 20 years are gone forever. That you should just give up
They're
on them.
gone for the
I want
foreseeable
the
future,
I want the largest possible Democratic
but you're
majority
not
that I
going
can
to
get.
get that. You're not going to get
You're
it.
saying it's impossible. I'm saying I think that these things shift very quickly in American politics in ways that we often don't expect. You are
They
making things seem as though they are completely static. And I'm saying I agree with you that we should make DC statehood and Puerto Rico statehood. And I'm okay with doing something with the filibuster. And I agree with you that Joe Manchin is not going to help you if you only have 50. But Joe Manchin, my point is, I'd rather have a senator who agrees with us 50% of the time than one who agrees with us 10% of
Let
the
me
time.
just make a point to you here and just ask you this question. Outside of the swing states, name me a Democratic senator in a state that Donald Trump won 3 times. Name
There
me
are
one.
none.
There are none. Exactly my point. And there will not
Okay,
be.
but
And you might get one or two in 2026, and only, by the way, if Republicans nominate a dumpster fire like Ken Paxton in Texas, or maybe you get lucky and win Ohio. Maybe. Okay. But all that does get you to 51 seats, and you're going to have senators in there who are not going to want to do the kind of structural reforms that you need to do to ensure you maintain political power. That's the point. You're going to have a backlash. You have a backlash every 2 years in American politics. It's happened every election since practically 2006. You've had a backlash election. It's almost every election has been a backlash. I guess 2012 is the exception to that, with Obama. Although Republicans did pick up seats, I think, in the House that year. But nonetheless, every election is a backlash election. 2010 was backlash to 2008. 14 was backlash to 12. 16 was a backlash to Obama. 18 was a backlash to Trump. 20 was a backlash to Trump. 22 was a backlash against Biden, although not as big a backlash as could have been. 2024 was a backlash against Biden that helped Trump. Yeah, and 2026 is going to be a backlash against Trump. So will 2028 probably too. Okay, so you cannot just win just enough seats and get these in places and hope that you can win in places that you haven't won in years. I mean, Texas, because they haven't won Texas in 30 frigging years. And when they do win these places, like a Alabama seat or the Missouri seat when McCaskill won, or Indiana when Donnelly won, they lose 6 years later. Heidi Heitkamp's another example of that. They can't hold the seat because these are
That
blue. These are not blue states.
okay, but there's two things that I think where I disagree most strongly with you. The first is I think you are proposing a complete like tightrope walk. Because if you're right that we can't win in those three-time Trump won states, then there is no pathway to a majority. None.
Yeah, there is. You create new
No,
states.
no, you can't create new states because you can't get a majority.
Hey, you make DC important. If you look, you can get a majority in 2028
No,
if you
no,
win.
no, no. You said that we can't win in states that Trump won three
No,
times.
no, no,
So
no, 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 no. If you win, I'm saying if you win all the low hanging fruit on Senate elections, if you win in Maine this year, if you win in North Carolina with Roy Cooper, if you win Wisconsin seat in 2028, if you win the other North Carolina seat in 2028, then or actually that's even more than you need. You only need 3 seats. And you hold what you have, you get to 50, right? Maine, North Carolina, and either Wisconsin, North Carolina, and maybe some outlier race like Texas or Alaska or Ohio gets you to 50. Once you're at 50, that's when you have to go for broke. That's when you have to get rid of the filibuster. That's when you have to expand the court. That's when you have to create new states. If you don't do those things, you're just going to lose that majority in 2 years. That's all that's going to happen. And everything you
I,
accomplish will be undone by the next Republican president.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying to you is you to get to 50 under that recipe, you have to do everything right. Every candidate has to be right. They have to run a good campaign. They can't
Yeah.
fumble it away.
Yeah.
And you're assuming that Roy Cooper, a 60 something uh traditional politician from a state that Democrats have only won Senate races in four times in like 50 years, if
Yeah.
I remember my math from the last time I walked through this, is going to support abolishing the filibuster and creating new states. And there's no guarantee of that. What I'm
There's no
saying is,
guarantee, but that's why you need to bring this idea up now and make clear Democrats that unless you're willing to wield political power in as ruthless a manner as Republicans do, you're just going to be on this a hamster wheel forever.
I look, I agree with that basic premise, but what I'm saying to you is, okay, first of all, and this can help us serve as a segue out of this because while we're having fun, I don't know that everybody out there,
I hope you guys are
it
enjoying this conversation. I think
yeah,
it's actually a really important conversation about the future Democratic Party. So I hope everyone's if you're enjoying it, please leave us a note in the chat or give us a
yeah,
hard sign. But I
yeah.
think it's actually an important conversation to be having.
I agree with that, and I think that the way I look at this is, okay, last night we saw a bunch of elections. We saw a Trump plus 12 state Senate or state House race in Georgia flip. We saw a Trump plus 50 uh, district in Iowa move 11 points. If you're talking about a roughly like low double digit swing in 2026, which is not impossible, you're putting Iowa, Texas,
Okay.
Ohio, those things are coming into play. And what
Yeah.
I'm saying to you,
Agreed.
all I'm arguing with you is I want the same structural reforms. The dumbest thing that Barack Obama did was not pushing DC and Puerto Rico statehood in 2009 when he had more than enough votes that he could have done it if he wanted to. Okay. But what
He
I'm saying to you
didn't have the
is
votes in the Senate for it. Didn't have the votes in the Senate
I
for it.
don't know about that. I don't know.
Too many moderates
I
and too many skittish Democrats.
I think some of those skittish Democrats would be a lot less troubled by that than they were about some of the liberal policy
You,
things.
you, you couldn't even get them to go along with filibuster reform, for Christ's sake. And you had
Right,
59
but you
at
wouldn't
60
have
at various points.
when you had 60, you wouldn't have needed filibuster reform. That's my point.
Sure, you would have.
Um,
When they had 59, they could have used filibuster reform, and they could have done with a
right,
majority,
right,
but they
right,
chose
right,
not
right,
to.
right. But I'm saying when they had 60, the minute they got to 60, Obama should have said, "Guys, I want Puerto Rico and DC as states
He wouldn't
now."
have gotten it. Because Democrats would have stopped it.
It's
Mark
unclear because I
Pryor,
don't think it.
Blanche Lincoln, Ben
Right.
Nelson,
But
Joe Lieberman,
I
never would have voted for
I
that.
don't think that there would have been the same. They would have seen the same political cost to that as for say voting for universal health care, or something like that, because
I
it's
don't.
not. It's a raw like party thing. Like, can you imagine? Think about it this way. Can you imagine the ad you have to run? Oh, he voted to make Puerto Rico a state. Like, is that really resonating with the average voter? I don't
This has
think
always
so.
been my point. This is what Democrats should have done on day one when Biden won, right? But they couldn't get Manchin and they mentioned. And first of all, by the way, they couldn't
Right.
have
But
gotten.
the problem, but this gets
Democrats
at
are
my
much
point.
more radicalized in the Senate than they were like even 4 or 5 years ago, and they're much more like people who said they would never support filibuster reform are on record saying they would. People like Chris Coons, for example, who's this big institutionalist.
Right. But we're disagreeing fundamentally on a very narrow point here, which is you think that the problem in 2021 was that Manchin and Sinema were useless and wouldn't vote for filibuster reform. I think the problem in 2021 was we had pissed away Senate seats in 2016, 2018, and 2020 and
But
should have
that's
had
irrelevant.
55 senators
But
so that
that's
they could have voted
irrelevant.
no.
But that's in the
I
past. You can't rewrite those elections.
no, but what
You
I'm
go with the
saying is
majority you have.
the majority. I want the largest possible majority. I want to win in Iowa and Ohio and Texas, and I am fine if those folks are not for
Uh,
filibuster reform because I want them to get reelected. The other thing is, if you go back and you look, the idea of the Heidi Heitkamps of the world as, oh, mistake one termers. That's not always true. You have had plenty of senators. Maybe my favorite example is Frank Church, who was elected from freaking Idaho
but
four
you're talking about the
times.
'70s, man. That's like a lifetime ago in American
That's true,
politics.
but John Tester won three times.
And he
I
lost the
mean,
last election. But why?
right,
Because he could not run
but
the state's partisan lean. Same thing with Brown in Ohio. You can't.
right,
This is the
but
problem. You're making my argument for me, right? Maybe you win in Iowa, maybe you win in Texas, but it's unlikely to happen. The odds are against Democrats winning, and even if they do win, the chance of them holding that seat is even slimmer, right? Doug Jones beat Roy Moore. He lost by 20 points to Tom Tuberville. Tom Tuberville is so dumb. It's a miracle he can even walk
it's
upright.
true.
Okay, it is true. I mean,
It,
Joe Donnelly won. He was a very conservative Democrat from Indiana. He got trounced when he ran for reelection. Same thing with Claire McCaskill. She beat Todd Aiken, engineered it, and then she lost to Josh Hawley. I mean, these Democrats cannot consistently win in these states. Look, they need to try to win. I'm not saying they shouldn't try to win. They should try to win. But the expectation should be for Democrats, it's not going to happen because it hasn't happened.
I last point on this. My hesitancy to go with what I'll call the Michael Cohen vision, which is to get the
I appreciate
narrowest
that.
possible majority and then do the most ruthless things you could possibly do. My cautionary note is North Carolina. Why is that my cautionary note? Well, North Carolina Democrats did what Michael is advocating for a long time. And now they're paying a
Who
significant
are
price for it.
Republicans in North Carolina?
No, Democrats. Democrats.
What did they do?
Why do you think it is? Democrats in the last two redistricting cycles, and now they've redistricted mid-decade as well, have controlled the governorship. But the governor doesn't have anything to do with redistricting in North Carolina. You know why? Because Democrats passed a law when they thought a Republican was going to win as governor or had won as governor, taking them out of the process. And it worked great for a cycle or two. And now they are almost permanently locked out of the state house, state senate, and congressional majorities from the state unless they win the state Supreme Court races and then win a court case. It's this stuff tends to blow back on you
You
eventually.
know that this is the way it works in almost every other country in the world that has a parliamentary democracy, right? I mean, one party wins, they enact their agenda because they have a majority in parliament or whatever legislature they have, and then they lose, and the other party does the reverse. That's fine. I'm okay with it. If Republicans can actually gain back power after Democrats add Senate seats, and they can win, fine. Add add Supreme Court justices, add Senate seats. Try. See if you can do it. Okay? And then Americans can judge in that election whether they support that or not. That's democracy.
But
As it is
okay,
now, we don't have fucking democracy in this country, right?
I,
You have
I
I'm sorry, but look,
no,
you cannot operate a country like this in which the Supreme Court gets to basically have the trump card on every single issue. and it is controlled by partisan Republicans. You cannot allow that if you're Democrats. You can't. This is what Republicans did. Like, give them credit. They understood a real political power in such a way to increase their advantage, and it succeeded. They stopped. They stopped Scalia after he died. They stopped him from appointing a replacement. Guess what? They paid. Not only did they pay no price for it, they benefited from it. Same
It,
after Ginsburg died.
it,
So all I'm saying is, like, you can't play this game of like, oh, what might happen? That's a problem for another day. You worry what's in front of you. And what's in front of you right now is a Republican Party that is dismantling democratic norms, and a Supreme Court that is not even pretending anymore to be a partisan arm of the Republican Party. And you cannot play this game with one hand tied behind your back. And that's what Democrats do. They have to be more as ruthless as Republicans are. And by the way,
I
it's
don't.
not even ruthless. It's small D democratic. Making DC Board is a small D democratic thing to do. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Go
I
ahead.
don't. I First of all, I don't think that Democrats are less ruthless. It's that they don't have the power. They don't have the numbers that Republicans do. I mean, the thing that gives me the most pause about this is, okay, let's say that we make DC and Puerto Rico states. I support that. I want Democrats to do that at the earliest possible opportunity, just like you do. Let's say we win all 4 Senate seats in those places. And by the way, I agree with Michael. I don't think we should have territories. They should be states. Every American citizen should have the same representation as every other American citizen. But if we're just doing DC and Puerto Rico, we get 55 seats. Okay, is like the ceiling, right? But that assumes that you continue to hold every seat in the swing states. It doesn't take much of a wave to start losing those seats, and then they're right back in power. And they have a higher ceiling than we do
Yeah.
because the Senate is geographically focused, and we are screwed by geography. I am for being ruthless. My friend Matt in the chat is absolutely right. We're abysmal messengers, and we're only
No, we're
now
not.
starting to
We're
get.
better messengers than they are. Much
No,
better
we're not.
messengers. Yes,
Not at
we
all.
are.
They have a much
Yes, we.
more
Why is Donald
simple.
Trump at 41% right now? Why? Why are they getting killed on healthcare? Why are Senate Republicans allowing to vote on healthcare right now? Why are Republicans talking about a healthcare plan? Because they're getting killed on the messaging war on healthcare. They are getting killed on this. They don't give a shit about healthcare. The only reason they're doing this is because on the messaging front, they are losing, and they know they are losing. And that's why they're trying to come up with some kind of bullshit solution. Sorry.
I I think Matt's right. It's his policies are awful. I think you're right in this instance, but I think that we've had an awful lot of bad Democratic messengers who don't know how to frame things in the right way. But in terms of ruthlessness, like we're doing it. Michael Bennett, who is as bland and institutionalist, like serious wonky type as you're going to find, the senator from Colorado, came out yesterday and said, I want an 8-0 delegation. If you elect me governor, I'm going to sign an 8-0 delegation, redraw the map.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's right. I think that's good. I'm just saying that I also think that the goal should be to get 70 Democratic senators or
And that's never going to
65.
happen. And it's never going to happen. Stop. Look, let me say one thing. This is to you and to Matt. Sorry, Matt. I don't mean to go after you, but just hear me out on this. If Democrats are such bad messengers, why are 10 of the 14 senators from swing states Democrats?
Because
If Democrats are
Republicans
such,
keep
wait, let me
nominating
finish. Let me
idiots.
finish. If Democrats are such bad, well, then you're making my point. If Democrats are such bad messengers, explain to me why the Democrats have won the popular vote in 7 of the last 9 presidential elections. 7 out of 9. You know the two times that happened in American history? After the Civil War, when Democrats basically, were the out party for because they started the war, and the post-McKinley era, when Republicans dominated, right? And they dominated politics. Democrats have won 7 of the last 9 presidential elections, and they the popular vote only had 5 presidents out of those 7. They are the dominant political party in this country. Not dominant. They are the more popular political party in this country. Okay, you don't win 7 out of 9 popular vote. You don't win popular vote in 7 out of 9 presidential elections if you're not the more popular party. That's just a fact. I don't give a shit about the electoral. You can look electoral college all you want to. That's a reality. Okay. And the second reality in the Senate and the governorships and the attorney generals in all these swing states, Democrats dominate. Why? Because they're better at messaging than Republicans are. Because Republicans nominate shitty candidates and Democrats nominate better candidates. That's right. The biggest myth in American politics today is that Democrats are bad at politics. That is wrong. I know they're out of power now. I get all of that. but they are better at politics than Republicans are. And they have shown this over and over again. What they are
You,
bad at, what they stink at, what they are criminally abysmal at is wielding political power when they get it. They do not know how to use power effectively. They don't know how to go after their opponents. They don't know how to ensure they maintain power. If they did those things, I guarantee you, Trump would not have won in 2024, and there'd be a Democratic Senate right now. Sorry, I'm off
I
the
I
soapbox.
agree with the second point, but the rejoinder to the first point on messaging is they could have had a very different picture if they were good at messaging. And you know why that is? Because they won the popular vote in 7 out of 9 presidential elections, and they only held the presidency 5 of those times. Why? Because Al Gore ran a bad campaign
No,
and
because
Hillary
they
Clinton
are
ran a
wimps.
bad
Because they are not
campaign.
ruthless enough. Because they don't fight. Because
No,
they buy the such when they go low, we should go high. Fuck that. Democrats should go lower.
I agree with that. But if Al Gore and Hillary Clinton had run good campaigns and won, we'd control the Supreme Court. Remember something.
I'm
Hillary
aware.
Clinton was in a situation in which we were going to finally gain a majority of the court back. And she blew it because she ran a shitty
She
campaign.
didn't blow it.
She did.
She was okay. You can say she blew it. I would say Jim Comey blew it for her. I would say these idiot Democrats who stayed home or voted for Bernie Sanders, they cost her the election. I would say the schmucks
Michael,
out
she
there who said,
didn't
"Oh,
go
Donald,
to Wisconsin.
stop, don't give me this Wisconsin bullshit." If she had won Wisconsin, she still would have lost the election. She went to Michigan. She went to Pennsylvania. I was in Pennsylvania election eve with her and Barack Obama at a rally. She lost Pennsylvania. Going to Wisconsin would not have won her the election. Spare me that garbage. That is absolute crap.
Their
Okay? It is
modeling and their polling was terrible. They were
whatever.
thinking about expanding into Arizona and Georgia and places like that instead of locking down 270. And she had the charisma of a stone.
Look,
She had
I'm not
spent
going to
20
relitigate
years
Hillary Clinton's
pushing
election
right up to
campaign.
the ethical line. And I mean, Gore tried to be everything to everyone. We blew it.
Well, I don't know why you keep doing this. You keep talking about like these past elections like it matters. I don't agree with you at all about Hillary Clinton, but who cares at this point? What's done is done. You keep talking about like, oh, we should have won there, we should have won there. Okay, yeah, we should have won there. We didn't, or Democrats didn't. But now the question is, what do you do about it? And the argument that you should just dwell on the past because you lost the past election that's the secondary argument.
I'm
The
not,
argument is what
but
do you
we're
do going forward?
right. But all I'm saying is, I don't think you can assess a party's ability to message on one election cycle or two election cycles.
I
You
agree.
have to look
I
at
agree.
the longer scope. And what I'm saying is, over my political lifetime, we have not been particularly good at messaging, and we've acknowledged that.
I can't. I don't understand how to make that argument when Democrats continue to dominate the popular vote. If they were so bad at messaging, they would not win the popular vote over and over again. Republicans have won 50% of the vote, more than 50%, one time since 1988. One time. That is 36 years. They won more than half the vote. Trump didn't do it. He got 49.8 or something. Bush did. It got 50.5. Democrats have done it, I think, 4 times,
I
maybe
only
3.
disagree in that I don't place a lot of stock in the popular vote because if we were determining our presidents by popular vote, I think
Like
both
a normal
parties would do a
country.
lot. Right. I agree with that. I think both parties would be running campaigns very differently. They'd be trying in places like California and Texas and New York instead of focusing on 7 states. And we should do that, by the way. I am fine with getting rid of the Electoral College, although if we do that, California and New York have to learn how to count. But anyway, let's talk about the special elections from
No, look,
last night.
I think this is a good conversation. I get a little animated. I'm sorry. This is all this is all. We do this
Well,
because
the
we love
funny
arguing
part
about it.
about this, the funny part about this is like 85% of the way we agree.
I'd say it's like
And
92% we agree.
right. Like we're arguing about this narrow sliver.
But
Hopefully people are
actually, it's
enjoying
not
this.
narrow. It's not narrow. It is really important because it speaks to something fundamental about Democratic Party. It's what do you do with power when you achieve it? And Democrats have taken the position that when they get power, they need to fulfill their policy agenda. And what we have seen over and over and over again is that voters do not reward parties that have a successful policy agenda. They didn't reward Obama. They didn't reward Clinton. They didn't reward Biden. They just don't reward Democrats and for doing things. right? There's a backlash. And so my argument is that stop thinking that policy is the way to political success. Okay. It is about structure. Structure, this is the most important phrase I think to take away from this entire discussion. Structure informs outcomes. The structure of our political system is what informs these outcomes, not the campaigns, not the policies, the structure. And the structure, I mean, around the margins, yes, the campaigning matters. But fundamentally, the structure is imbalanced against Democrats. It is. Everyone agrees with that. And unless you change that, you're just on the hamster wheel over and over again.
And by the way, I actually agree with that and think that the first thing we should be doing is instead of just redistricting congressional seats, we should be redistricting state legislatures at the earliest possible opportunity so that we can lock in who decides how to draw the maps. I think that's really
Yeah,
important. And I don't see these things as mutually exclusive, by the way. I think we should be pursuing structural change when we get power, and we should be trying to entrench power, and we didn't do enough when we've had those opportunities. So I don't disagree with that at all. Some
yeah. Pass a law that basically bans partisan gerrymandering, which the Supreme Court has said
Yeah,
they're okay with. Do
yeah, I
that.
would
We'll
do
see if
that
they
in a
in
heartbeat.
a heartbeat. Do it in a heartbeat. It's protect the Voting Rights Act against Republicans trying to destroy it. In other words, you can do other things, by the way, that increase political power for Democrats. Right? You can expand voting access to expand the Voting Rights Act, and protect minority voting, protect minority districts in Republican states. You can do all those things that will actually improve Democrats' potential to actually hold on to political power. You can expand the House, for Christ's sake, which is what Democrats should do. You can do lots of things you can do that ensure that when if you win in 2028, you don't lose power in 2030. And
Well,
that's the bottom line. If you can hold on to power in this country for 2-3 cycles, then you can accomplish something real. And by the way, build voter support for what you've accomplished.
the one thing I would say to that, and you're actually raising a very interesting question. We always have midterm backlashes. Like literally, the president's party has lost seats, with the exception of 34, 98, and 2002, I believe, in every midterm election. Okay,
No,
this
98
is not
I
something.
think Democrats lose seats in 98 or they gain seats in 98.
No, they gained 5 House seats, and the Senate was 3-3. They split the
And
split.
Democrats lost and Republicans picked up House seats in 02
Yes, Republicans picked up House seats and Senate seats in '02.
and won the Senate in
Um,
02. Right.
but what's interesting, what you seem to be obliquely arguing, I don't even know if you're thinking this, but what we've seen consistently throughout that time is that presidents tend to get reelected in most situations, even though their party has midterm backlashes. And that limits their ability to do anything after the first 2 years, but that they win reelection. What we've seen in the last decade now is something a little bit different, where
Yeah.
Donald Trump won, then he lost. Joe Biden won, then they lost. If Trump loses again, and I think or the Republicans lose again in 2028, which I think is more likely than not as we stand today, we'd be entering into a new paradigm where now we're not just having midterm backlashes. Now, when everybody shows up and then we have the presidential electorate, they're flipping back and forth. That
Look,
people are so
the,
disgruntled.
Yeah, look, the last 4 elections have gone presidential, have gone Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. That hasn't happened since the 1890s when Grover Cleveland won his 2 non-continuous terms. Look, we had from 1912 to 1992, three incumbent parties lost, were one-termers. Okay, that was Taft in 12, Carter in 76, and 80, and Bush in 92. It's happened twice in the last 5 years. Okay, Trump first, and then Biden. So, and it will happen with Trump again, by the way, I guess Republican could win, so that's true. But if it doesn't happen, my bottom line is you're seeing this anti-incumbent attitude among voters, and so Democrats, even if they succeed in getting back political power, have to assume that because of the anti-incumbency in the country, they're going to lose power just as quickly. So my point is that if you gain power, you need to ensure that you maintain power. And you're not going to maintain power by passing lots of laws. It just we have reams of political science data that shows overwhelmingly that voters do not reward political parties for passing their political agenda. Okay, they just don't.
That's true.
And so if you go in, let's say you go into you win in 2032 with 51-49, you can make a 10 seat majority in the House. Okay, maybe 10 or 15 seats. Okay, if you add 4 Senate seats, well, all of a sudden you're 55-49. That's pretty good. And then if you add um, a bunch of House seats, you probably would add, I guess, what, I don't know, 8 to 10, 6 to 8, something like 6 or 7, 6, 7, 6, 7. Had to do it. Sorry, I had to do it every single time. Six, seven
So the
House
vice
seats.
president wants to ban those numbers. It was actually the
Um,
one cute thing he actually said.
I like the
Uh,
6, 7. You increase the 10 seat majority from say a 16 seat majority. So all I'm saying is like, and it makes it less likely you're going to face a backlash 22. By the way, I'll say one other thing too. If you want to mobilize Democrats in a midterm election, uh, uh, the one way to do that is to actually govern with some, and I'm going to not use the word cojones, is to actually like be as ruthless as Republicans are, to push your agenda forward, to enact kind of reform Democrats have wanted for generations and haven't been able to get. That's how you actually, I think, not just win power, you hold power.
I Yeah, I mean, I agree with all this. I would expand the House to probably like 501 reps or something like that. Like,
Works for me.
I'm all for that, and I actually think that that is something that we could build public support for and get Republicans to do because it's not abundantly clear which party would benefit from it.
And but
Um,
let me make one other point about that. Democrats should run on procedural reform, right? That's what, remember, 1994 Contract with America. If you look at Contract with America, it was all procedural reform. Run on banning stock trading by congressmen. Run on pardon reform. Okay. Run on, what was the other one? That kind of populist. This is the one I'm thinking of. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, run on these sort of populist political agenda pieces that are more procedural, that shake up the system. That's kind of stuff people actually, I think that's kind of thing that actually would rally those sort of squishy middle of swing voters.
I'm okay with that being part of what you do, and I think Trump may make some of that, especially pardon reform, more germane, and clean things up. In Washington, we're going to be the ones that actually drain the Trump swamp.
Ugh.
I think that that could be a beneficial way to take advantage of his awful corruption. But let me bring in two stories that are breaking. Once again, Mike Johnson is falling on his face. It seems like the rule to bring the National Defense Authorization Act to the floor is going to fail because of a right-wing revolt, because he's the most incompetent leader in either party. It
He's not the most. That's not fair. He's not the most. He's actually been pretty successful. He did pass the big bad beautiful bill in last year, which was pretty impressive. I mean, earlier this year.
I'm just talking about by like rule votes and things like that. No other leader's seen failures where they're constantly
I don't
humiliated.
know. It's happened to John Boehner all the
Um,
time, though.
Yeah, but Boehner never lost a rule on the floor.
That's true, I
Um,
suppose.
that used to be real. And the other thing, and this has something that we're gonna like in this, and something we're gonna hate in this. We have a new Pan-Atlantic research poll. I don't know who they are off the top of my head in the Maine Senate race. Okay, you ready for this?
Hmm.
The Maine Senate Democratic primary. We're gonna like this part. Janet Mills 47, Graham Plattner 37, other undecided 15.
Wow.
Um, But then we get to the general election, and we've got Graham Plattner 43, Susan Collins 42, undecided 15. Susan Collins 43, Janet Mills 43, undecided 14.
I
So,
I don't think that matters.
um,
I don't take seriously those head to head unless there's a huge discrepancy between the Democratic candidates because it's so early and a lot of the voters don't really haven't thought much about the Senate race. The Democratic primary thing is very interesting because I'll tell you right now the Democrats' only path to the Senate is if Janet Mills is a Democratic nominee in May. I think we agree on that.
yeah.
You want to talk about Texas Senate race in Texas? What's going on there?
Yeah, if we're gonna get ourselves worked up, I might as well get worked up over the dumbest thing that happened in politics this week. For those who didn't follow it, Colin Allred was running for Senate. He ran last time and outperformed Harris in Texas, even though he is not the most charismatic of people. In fact, I think my poodle is substantially more charismatic than he is. But he dropped out of the Senate race this time and is running for his or a House seat. I don't
It's his old house seat. It's his old house seat.
with the map there. I'm not sure which.
Well, yeah, it's a different map, but it's basically his
But
old seat.
he's running for House, and Jasmine Crockett is running for Senate. And Jasmine Crockett is a favorite of the online left. She is. as Firebrand gets. Maybe her most cringeworthy moment was when she dubbed Greg Abbott, who is paralyzed, the governor of Texas, Governor Hot Wheels, which is just as bad as Trump using the R word. In my view, you don't mock someone's disability. A tree
I
fell
agree.
on the man.
I agree.
And she, first of all, Republicans like are gleeful right now about this. John Cornyn said on the record the incumbent Democratic Senator Kamala Harris got 42%. She's not going to do any better. In fact, apparently, the National Republican Senate Committee was encouraging Democrats to call her office and ask her to run for Senate over the summer. That tells you how much they wanted this
They're
because she
desperate.
cannot win in Texas. She, first of all, her theory of the case indicates that she's not very smart about politics because she said, look, I'm not going to win over Trump voters. I'm just going to turn out more people. Well, it's Texas, Jasmine. Congresswoman, you can't win like that. Donald Trump won this state by double digits. Okay, you're going to have to flip people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024. You're not going to win. That's the first thing. But the second thing is you need someone who can appeal to moderate swing voters to win in a very red place. Lloyd
You need to
Bentsen was the
appeal
last.
to Republican. You need to appeal to Trump voters because Trump won the state. It's his bottom
Yeah,
line. You need to appeal
yeah,
to at least some segment of the Republican voters.
right. And like Roy Cooper does that. He has the ability
Janet
because
Mills does
he
that.
Janet Mills does that. Although she doesn't need to win Trump voters because Trump lost her state.
Actually, you're right. As long as she wins Harris voters, she would win.
That's right. Roy Cooper is the example of, in 2020 he got reelected while Trump was winning. So there were Cooper Trump voters in
Yep.
North Carolina in 2020. Jasmine Crockett is not going to win Trump voters. And I got a lot of backlash for saying this online last week, but that's just basic reality. It's got nothing to do with the fact that she's black. It's got nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. It has everything to do with her ideological positioning in a red state. Jasmine Crockett would be a perfectly fine senator from New York or Massachusetts, or you pick your blue state. I find her amusing at times. I think she could. I get a kick out of some of her messaging, especially when she's targeting Trump himself. But she's not somebody who can win in Texas. And the problem is, this is a bad map for Democrats. Okay, they have to get to a Senate majority. You have to win red states, not just purple states, not just blue states, red states, states that Trump won by double digits in 2024. And the best way of doing that is to have as many of them competitive as possible. Because if you have to win all of them that are competitive, that's a very heavy lift. So to me, that's Alaska, it's Texas, it's Iowa, it's Ohio. It's how do we maximize this playing field? And Jasmine Crockett is exactly the wrong way to do that. It's the opposite. It shrinks the playing field. It takes money that Republicans would have to spend in Texas and lets them send it other ways. James Talarico needs to win this primary for Democrats to have any chance at this seat.
So I'm going to say something controversial here. Okay. You said a second ago that it's not because Jasmine Crockett is black and Jasmine Crockett is black and she's a woman. I think those are factors actually that actually don't bode well for her candidacy. And we have both complained about Mandela Barnes' candidacy in Wisconsin in 2022 against Ron Johnson. And I said before that election that took place, I said I just had my doubts that in a state with a very small black population, that Barnes could win a statewide election. And now I'm not saying that's why he lost, but I think it played a role. I think it played a role with Andrew Gillum in Florida as well, um, and who was black, who lost the primary, who lost the election to Ron DeSantis. Although you could argue that's that example because Rick Scott also won the Senate campaign against what's his
Bill
name,
Nelson.
Bill Nelson. Thank
Bill
you.
Nelson, yeah.
Right. So I just think that in certain environments, and a red state environment like Texas, with the way that Trump is using racist rhetoric, that I just think that she is going to face a greater challenge as a black woman than even a black man like Colin Allred. And I will make a difference. Um, I guess I'm not going to go. Well, I mean, I think there is, in the perception of Republican voters, there's a difference between Colin Allred and Jasmine Crockett. I think they would see them as different kinds of black candidates. Like you might see people used to say about that Jesse Jackson and say Barack Obama, right? These are different types of. I mean, Barack Obama to a large extent tried to de-racialize himself, which is one of the reasons why I think he was successful as a Democratic as a presidential candidate. I don't know that Jasmine I can do that or want to do that. And I think that's a problem. I think it could hurt her. And I just think that in a race against like even like Ken Paxton, who is such a scandal-ridden candidate, I think she would face a challenge there. Look, I'm on the record saying, and by the way, I don't like this. I don't like having expressing this view, but I think you have to be honest about the politics of a place like Texas. Like I have also said on the record that uh, and I wrote a piece back in May saying that if you look at the data, a big part of the reason why Kamala Harris lost is because she was a woman, because Democrats lost support among men in 2016 and 24 when women were on top of the ballot, and they gained it back in 20 when Biden was on top of the ballot. And I do think that that hurt Democrats, and it probably would hurt them again if they ran a woman again in 2028. I don't like that. I would like a female president in this country. I think I would very much like to see a female president. But I think that is unfortunately, there are enough Americans who don't want to see that and who will vote against a woman and will tax the political party for nominating a woman. Which I think is what happened to Clinton in 2016, what happened to Harris. So I do think it's a problem for Crockett. But putting all that aside, she is exactly the kind of candidate who is not going to appeal to Republicans. She just isn't. She's a partisan. She's a very intense, flagrant partisan. And in the same way that an intense, flagrant partisan would lose in a blue state, like Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania when he ran for governor, for example, right? She probably will lose in Texas. She's just a bad candidate for that state. She the fact that she can mobilize Democrats is her problem because that also mobilizes Republicans. I don't know if Talerico's any better. I mean, and by the way, I think Albert dropped out because I think he just realized he couldn't win black voters, and so there's no way he can win the primary, and so he's going to run for the House instead. Uh, but I think if Democrats don't nominate Talerico, and I'm not saying Talerico can win. By the way, if Cornyn is the nominee, which by the way does seem increasingly unlikely, I think Cornyn wins. If Paxton's the nominee because he's so scandal-ridden, because I think he does alienate some conservatives, some Republicans, a Democrat has a chance. I don't know if Talerico's that guy. I haven't seen the evidence so far. It's just that he is. But I think he gives Democrats a better chance to win. And like just as in Maine too, I don't know that Janet Hills is going to beat Susan Collins, but I do know looking at that electorate and past elections that more likely than not, she is a better bet to beat Collins than Grant Plattner.
I think that there are two things that we need to disentangle. I think Michael's 100% right about race and gender and how they play in our politics. That it is harder to get elected as a black woman than it is as a white woman or a white man, and it's harder to get elected as a black man than it is as a white candidate. Okay, I think that we need to acknowledge that. But I also think there's a separate thing that we can disentangle from this, which is if you're a firebrand, it doesn't matter. Jasmine Crockett could be a white man. If she said the exact same things that she says, that white man would lose in Texas because you don't
Actually,
fit ideology.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure you're right about that.
I don't think that a very far to the left white man who is lobbing incendiary rhetoric every day is winning in the state of Texas. I really don't.
I,
Um,
I
like my
you,
ideal candidate in Texas for the Democrats is somebody like Henry Cuellar, were he not corrupt, who is a Latino from down in South Texas who has won a lot of Republican voters over the last half decade, is socially conservative, and is not my favorite Democrat, but I think fits the state a lot better than somebody else. I just think in a conservative place, you need a centrist candidate.
let me say this: that I don't even know what centrist means at this point. I don't think most of us know what it means, but I will say this: that like Kamala Harris, if she was a black woman from Iowa, would have had a better chance of winning the election than being a black woman from California and more
I agree
specifically
with
the
that.
Bay Area, because that is coded as liberal. And I think that Crockett plays on certain racist stereotypes of as a black woman, and I think that works against her in a place like Texas. Again, I'm not defending this. I don't like it, but I think it's a reality of our politics that we just can't ignore. We've seen how over the past several cycles, that gender and race have played an enormous role in determining electoral outcomes, particularly on the presidential level, but not just the presidential level. And so, I mean, I think that is a factor too. I think Crockett is the absolute wrong candidate. If she ran in a place like I mean, at a personal level, I'm not a huge fan of hers because, and I used to be, but I saw this clip of her a couple weeks ago about the Epstein thing. She attacked Lee Zeldin for taking allegedly taking contributions from Jeffrey Epstein. It turned out it was Jeffrey Epstein who's a dentist in New York. And when it was, and she went on CNN, and when this was brought up to her,
Look,
she
Michael,
refused
nobody
to.
likes their dentist.
That's fine. I like my dentist actually. He's a friend of mine. He's a good friend. But she refused to acknowledge she made a mistake. She refused to apologize. Like, she made a mistake. That's fine. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm not going to criticize her for that. But she refused to own up to it. And it just struck me as like, I was really turned off by watching the interview with her. I was like, this is irresponsible. You made a mistake. You unfairly, you can malign Lee Zeldin, who's head of the EPA, in many ways, but this is not one of them. And just be honest about what you made a mistake, but she wouldn't do it. And I don't like that. And I think it's bad in politicians. I think it's bad in people in general. And so I don't, I'm not a huge fan of hers. But that, all that aside, if she ran in a place like, I don't know, Delaware, which has a black female senator, or Maryland has a black female senator, I
Black.
mean, that's fine. I don't know that she would do well in those places, but that's fine because those are blue states, and she's not going to put Democrats' potential to win the Senate in danger. But if she's the nominee in Texas, she will.
Let
Can
me
we?
just give
Yeah,
you one more example of her caustic rhetoric. Jake Tapper pushed her yesterday because she told Vanity Fair last year that Trump supporting Latino voters have a quote slave mentality on immigration policy. Well, that is not something that can win. I don't care if you're a white man, black woman, whatever your race is. You can't win in the state of Texas saying that.
there are a lot of
It's
Hispanic
just
voters in Texas. A lot of Hispanic
yeah.
voters in Texas. Can we just?
Let's talk
But
about
let's just say
last
one.
night.
Yeah, let's talk about last night really quick. Do you want to just give the recap? I think you know better than
Yeah.
I do.
So we saw a bunch of special elections. The three that I thought were most significant, and one regular scheduled election because we're idiots in America and can't just standardize and centralize our elections. Democrats won the mayorship of Miami, and there's some dispute. The media's been running with it's the first time in almost 30 years, but apparently there was an independent in there who was the chair of the Florida Democratic Party. These are nonpartisan elections. But the fact is, the Democrat won, and the Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump endorsed candidate lost. And Democrats did better with every racial group than Harris did in this race. And then the earthquake, the one that seemed to have shaken or shook up a lot of Republicans, was the state house race in Athens, Georgia. Now, to set the scene, we've talked a lot about redistricting and gerrymandering. Okay, and what Republicans did is they created their four districts around Athens. I learned this last night. I'm not that dorkish that I knew this all along. But one of those districts is a vote sink.
I
It's
mean, you
very,
are
very, very
dorkish.
blue.
You are dorkish, but not on this point.
Yes.
I say that as
Um,
somebody who is, I hope, more dorkish, or at least as dorkish as you.
look, we can be cool. We can talk about the best thing that ever came from Athens, REM, and
You know, I've
give
never been a huge
ourselves
REM
a
fan. I don't know. I don't know.
they're better than I thought, but they're not my most favorite.
Yeah.
I saw them open for Springsteen on the Vote for Change tour in
Okay.
2004.
Okay.
But so anyway, there's a blue vote sink, which is they put most of the blue voters there, and then they split the rest of Athens, which is where the University of Georgia is, college town, in three red districts, so that they could win all three of them. Well, one of them flipped last night. It proved to be a dummy mander. It's a district that Donald Trump won by 12 points. The Democrat did better in the rural area and absolutely crushed it in Athens. We saw massive swings in some of the University of Georgia polling locations. I sent one to Michael last night. It was so surprising to me that it was that big, but they really flipped things in these University of Georgia precincts, which bodes well for Democrats in terms of liberal or in terms of young voters. So that was the kind of earthquake. Even the Republican insurance commissioner, that yes, Kate Jewell is on there, good historian, writing college radio
I was
books.
just looking up your book,
Yeah,
Catherine. I got to check this out.
Kate's a friend, and she knows everything about indie music and college radio and things. And so, but that was in Georgia, the state insurance commissioner, Republican, in Athens, or Republican. I think his name's King is the last
By
name.
the way, what
Said
I'm sorry, what is the name of Catherine's book? Is it Authenticity and Commodification? Is that the name of your book? You can just say yes, Catherine. Is
I
that?
believe it's the new project that I don't remember the title on that isn't out
Oh
yet,
no, that's
but
the name of
I
a YouTube chat. Sorry, I had that wrong. I see.
yeah,
It's from the underground, live from the underground.
yes, there
Oh,
there it
nice.
is. live from the underground.
Cool.
It's on college
You picked
radio.
this up.
Um, and
Nice.
it's
Congratulations,
really
Captain.
interesting stuff. But anyway, John King, the insurance commissioner, Republican, said we better wake up. Our donors aren't awake. Our voters aren't awake. And apparently, the private rumblings were even worse among Georgia Republicans. But that was in Georgia. And then the other one that jumped out at me, the swing was over 20 points. Republicans still won, but a state house or states, I think it was state house race at the Villages in Florida
Yeah.
swung 20 points. And that matters because for those of you who don't know, the Villages is this retirement community that's like its own congressional district. It's so big. It's where all the
Yeah.
Midwestern Republicans go to retire in Florida. And it's a massively Republican area. And it swung 20 points to the Democrats. So all in all, it was a very good night for Democrats. I don't believe there was a single. I think every single race that was on the ballot swung by double digits to the Democrats with
About
last.
13 or 14 points. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the average. So it's yet another indication that the wave is coming for Republicans.
Yep.
And that if you're a Republican in an R plus 10 district or R plus 12 district, you might just want to retire because you don't want the hard campaign that's coming for you. Especially because Congress can't govern and is so dysfunctional.
Yeah, the seat in Georgia was, like you said, it was a Trump plus 12 seat. I mean, I think there's two things to take away from this. One is that a wave is coming, but I think it's also, I mean, this is a look. The average is like 13 or 14 points. The Democrats are overperforming the special election, which is an insane number, and it's higher, I think, than ever before. But I think you have to understand part of that is because it is a good reminder that 2024 was an outlier election. That Harris was lost, particularly in non-swing states, was um, unusually large and probably larger than it didn't reflect the true feelings of the electorate. I mean, I pointed this out, in I think I did this on I did a deep dive like Illinois as a state, and Trump got like a slightly higher percentage of the vote than he got in 2020. Not and 2020 was a huge turnout election. He got slightly higher, which is pretty good, I guess, because 2020 was such a large turnout. But Harris got significantly lower. So that happened a lot of places. So I do think that what you're seeing here is uh, that 2024 was an unusually bad election for Democrats, and they are going to do better in 2026.
The
Um,
other the other ominous sign for Republicans in the Miami mayor race, the Cuban precincts shifted 15 to 20 points to the
yeah,
left, which is a sign that the immigration stuff that Trump is doing may even be fueling backlash against what was a rock-ribbed Republican constituency forever.
yeah.
Cuban Americans have been very, very, very Republican, and that honestly raises some real questions. Republicans want to redistrict Florida. And there are questions as to how far they can go in South Florida without this blowing up disastrously on them
I mean, I think,
because
yeah,
of that.
I think the big problem, that Republicans are dealing with is they have nothing to run on. They have nothing positive to run on to talk about. I mean, 2018 they lost the midterms. I mean, that was a backlash election, but part of their problem was that they couldn't really run on the tax cuts because they weren't popular. And this gets back to my messaging point. Democrats won the messaging war on those tax cuts. They uniformly opposed them, and they were very unpopular. And so, what you're dealing with going to 2026 is that the one big legislative accomplishment for Republicans, which is the tax cut bill, is incredibly unpopular and is going to, I think, get more unpopular as some of these cuts begin to go into effect. You're also dealing with the healthcare increases, the premium increases. They just have nothing to run on. And they could try to run on Trump and the economy, but good friggin' luck with that. People hate
Well,
this economy.
and Michael, I think it goes beyond that. They're empty when it comes to ideas. Not only do they have nothing to run
Yeah,
on, they have nothing to do next year. They passed their one
yeah,
piece of legislation.
yeah.
Like,
That's right.
if you go back to 2021 at this point, Democrats had plenty of things they still wanted to do, and they did a bunch of bipartisan things in the election year. Um, because we have ideas. They have none. They
Yeah,
literally have none. They don't have they keep talking about a reconciliation bill, and when people ask the leadership about it, they're like, "Well, what would we put in it?" We
yeah.
like they don't even know what
They
they want
don't.
to
There's
do
nothing
at this
they
point.
want to do. There's nothing they don't like to do to enact legislation because that's an anathema to modern conservatism. And I think that yeah, it's a big problem for them. But I think it's also a case that look, we talked about Trump's rally earlier in this thing, and it's worth noting that that rally was part of this White House effort to get Trump out on the stump talking about the economy. Well, first of all, he spent pretty much the entire time complaining and whining about various things and making racist statements. But on the economy, on affordability, for example, he called the whole thing a hoax. I mean,
No, no, but
he
I love when he does this. He said, "I'm not allowed to say that anymore," because his aides clearly told him,
and
like,
then he says it,
"Sir, this is stupid." Right?
right? And then he says it, and I mean, look, he's the worst messenger for the party. He's unpopular. He refuses to acknowledge that this. I mean, this political interview, they asked him like, "How do you rate the economy?" He said A plus plus. Nobody thinks that way. You sent me some numbers earlier about how people's talking about the inflation and the economy. I mean, you got people are suffering. People are hurting out there. And he is not doing anything about it. And what's worse is he is congenitally incapable of acknowledging that the economy is not operating perfectly because he can't accept the idea that anything he does is a failure. So he will continue to say the economy is doing great and the Democrats are making up this affordability hoax. That's going to make it hard for Republicans to run on. And I will say this, I am surprised that we have not seen more retirements. I know we keep seeing that the retirements are coming, when are they coming? Because I haven't seen them, and I would surprise or not, they haven't happened yet.
I said that in my video this morning to my subscribers. Um, I we keep seeing this reporter after reporter after reporter, and maybe people are waiting until Congress leaves session next week, for the year. Maybe they are, still on the fence and want to go home and talk again. But we had a report the other night from a very good reporter, Leanne Caldwell, saying there are going to be 20 retirements.
Yeah, I'll believe
Well,
that when I see it.
yeah, I need to see that before I, believe any of it. And right now we haven't had any of that. And it's also sometimes possible that leadership asks some of these people to not do it now so as they don't start like the panic for the exit. But, so maybe some of these people are waiting, but we're coming up, Texas's filing deadline passed, but we're coming up on filing deadline starting over
Yeah.
the next few months. So if we're gonna get we're gonna get it soon. And it really as I've said to people over and over, that is something you have to watch because that's what helps waves to snowball is
Yeah.
retirements. Open seats that cost more money to defend, open seats where all of a sudden you nominate an absolute mouth breathing Neanderthal idiot who can't win and puts a red seat in at risk. Republicans are experts at that. Um, that is a specialty of Republican primary voters. So
Yeah.
it's something to watch because it's really going to determine the contours of how big is the playing field next year. Now, obviously, if Trump keeps driving the economy into a ditch and then refuses to acknowledge that people are suffering, the environment's going to get worse anyway. But if you expand that playing field with retirements, then it starts talking about compounding. Um,
Yeah, no, I
then
agree. I agree. And I think, the thing also about that I think is worth noting is that, the there's just really little reason to see this is getting better for Republicans. I just don't see what's the big thing that's gonna happen. I mean, I think
they
Trump's
claim some of their
approval.
tax cut stuff is going to kick in,
No, I mean,
but
I go back to my point earlier. People don't reward uh, legislators for that. I don't see that happening, and I think it's a problem that Trump is unpopular. This is the bottom line. Trump is unpopular. He is going to keep doing and saying things that are going to continue to make him unpopular. They're going to, ensure that those numbers don't get better. Um, I don't see any reason for them to have much hope. And I think it's, when you look at these special elections, you do see Democrats are very motivated to vote. They're very motivated to turn
and
out.
and by the
I
way, I
think
want to
the
bring
I'll
uh,
just say one last thing. I think the potential for like wave elections are not what they used to be because there's so many gerrymandered districts. But I do think that if things stay this bad, it increases the number of Republicans who are vulnerable, but it also just puts the Senate directly in play. And I think we first did one of these things. I think I said it was like 10% chance Democrats take back the Senate. I'm probably up to 20 or 25% now, just because the situation is the environment is so bad for Republicans. It's so bad for Republicans. And I think, look, it was bad for Democrats in 22 also, but they were bailed out by Republicans nominating a lot of shitty candidates. Um, that and it could happen in
And
Texas, could happen
Dobbs.
in Maine, and Dobbs helped too. The overturning Roe versus Wade, yeah, that helped too.
I think the other thing to watch is this week, Republicans, the least conservative. I will not use the term moderate because by historical standards, these people are not moderates. But the
I use the
least
term
conservative,
less crazy Republicans.
yeah, the less crazy or least right wing Republicans in the House are furious right now because leadership will not give them a vote on extending the ACA subsidies, and they understand the politics of it. In fact, right now they are withholding their votes on the NDAA rule. The conservatives have voted no, but these guys are the moderates are all, or the least right wingers are all holding out, and they're really angry. And if leadership won't even give them a vote on something that might protect them, they may start thinking about taking a walk to the exit, in which case those districts really will flip.
Brian, by the way, why is the leadership refusing to give them a vote?
Because the majority of their caucus, including the leadership, doesn't support extending the ACA subsidies. They don't care if your
Okay,
premiums
quote.
skyrocket.
I think the answer I was looking for there was, yeah, you're right, by the way, but the answer I was looking for is that they know it'll pass. They know it'll
Right.
pass.
Well,
And by the
they
way, there's a
know.
discharge petition that could actually force their hand on
Yeah.
this as well.
Well, you're going to get it. The problem is that's not going to get a vote in the Senate.
Probably not.
But realistically, one, and this is actually a dynamic we haven't talked about much. We can save it, but I don't think that people fully grasp that while Donald Trump is a different type of Republican, he certainly has no ideological predilections, and he has brought to power some more populisty Republicans. The people who wield power are still dyed in the wool Reaganites who don't care about
Mm,
people suffering.
you think that
Mike
applies to Mike
Johnson,
Johnson?
yeah.
Dude,
I
yes, but
mean,
Johnson?
yeah, I mean Johnson for the House and the Senate in the NDAA, both chambers passed an IVF thing, something to make the military health insurance include coverage of IVF. Mike Johnson forced it out because he's a Christian conservative of the old type, the formerly dominant type. And this is the second or third time he's done something like that. He is a small government, no government health care kind
Hmm.
of guy. I guarantee you, if Mike Johnson had his way, we wouldn't have Medicare or Medicaid anymore. At
There
least
was
not Medicaid.
there's an interesting story in the Times about a week or so ago, and Andy Carney had this piece about Republican women who are upset with Johnson, and it was just kind of like, it was sort of just them complaining to her off the record and her printing it. But there was one tidbit in there I thought was sort of interesting, which is that some of the women, and we're talking about like Elise Stefanik and Taylor Greene and Nancy Mace and others. The one thing they were upset about with Johnson was that they felt as though, because of his sort of evangelical faith, he doesn't respect women and doesn't think they should be in positions of power and doesn't engage with them and doesn't look them in the eye, doesn't want to talk to them. And, that speaks to, I think, what you're talking about a little bit, that he's like an old school evangelical, which makes, of course, his support for
Yeah,
Trump that much more deplorable.
he is.
But Toon is much more of like an establishment Republican, uh, and that's sort of what you'd expect from the Senate. Um, but and I'll just say in Johnson's defense, sort of, he's not. Look, he had some successes. I think he deserves a little credit for. He helped him get back the majority. Or keep the majority, I should say, in 24, which is pretty impressive. He did pass the bill. He you know, the government shutdown, which could happen in February, he was able to get that budget through the House. Did it in second shutdown again in the fall. But it's an impossible job. No one can do it effectively. I mean, you're dealing with a bunch of crazy people who don't believe in political compromise. And I mean, look, if right wing Republicans cared about maintaining their majority, they would throw the moderates a bone and they would extend Obamacare subsidies. Like this isn't complicated. Like these guys are all in danger of losing. This is the one thing that might be able to help them, but they won't do it. And
And by the way, the issue that the right wing wants to die on this one is over Hyde Amendment protections. And for those who don't know, the Hyde Amendment bans using federal dollars to pay for abortions.
Right.
It goes back to the 1970s, and the government subsidies cannot pay for abortions. But what these people want to do is make it so that no plan offered on the insurance exchanges can offer coverage of abortion.
Which is ridiculous.
That's their goal. And like that's this old school impulse. And the irony is that we're still seeing this despite the fact that Donald Trump has basically told the pro-life movement to go fuck off. In this term, he doesn't
Yeah.
care about their priorities. He's not even faking it. He gave them their Supreme Court justices, and
I
that's
mean,
it.
he did give them an overturn Roe v. Wade, so
I mean,
he has a point on that one actually.
but they're all calling for the FDA commissioner to be fired because there was a report that came out yesterday that said that he's not going to do any study about abortion pills until after the midterms. And they're like beside themselves. And it's like, well, you sold yourself cheap, guys.
Yeah, he
You
did. That's
got
right.
behind a guy who doesn't believe in your cause at all, and he is just basically thumbing his nose at you. But the Republicans on Capitol Hill, most of these people are still basically the old type of Republicans. They are not. They sound like
Uh,
Trumpers, but they're
I
in so much as they
don't know
have
about that.
beliefs.
I'm not sure about that one. I'm not sure at that one.
Like I look
Still
at it
there?
this
Okay.
way.
Yeah.
If we were all talking about a Trump Republican Party, then they'd all be talking about like passing something like what Josh Hawley proposed, which would make $25,000 of medical bills deductible every year, which would help a lot of Americans out. They'd be talking
Yeah.
about, greater union protections like Hawley does. Most of these people can't bring themselves to be for any of that because it's anathema to what they were raised to believe politically as like what we stand for. They haven't actually converted ideologically to Trumpism. They've made their peace with it. They try to sound like it. They've
That's
bitten their
interesting.
tongue
That's
on
an interesting
things like
argument.
trade. They've bitten and some of the stuff like I think what they've done is on things like trade and immigration that he actually cares about, they won't cross him. But on the rest of the stuff that they know that he's an ideologically empty vessel, they have continued to try to swing him to them instead of understanding that he has a potential to create this kind of socially conservative-ish, nativist, working class party that is economically much more liberal than their old one. They
Nah,
don't
look,
seem to get the opportunity.
I just think these are look, Republicans, all they care about is power, and they're just thinking about how to maintain power. And the bottom line for them is a lot of them, I think, just want to get past the filing deadlines for primaries, and then they can, go out on their own, maybe go after, maybe be more critical of Trump or at least distance themselves from the White House. But until then, you're not going to see it happen because they're too afraid of a primary challenge. Can we just mention one last thing here? I was going to tell you before the start of that I wanted to go a little bit earlier today, which of course we failed at miserably. So I wanted to stop at 3 if we can. But I want to
Sure.
mention the the Texas redistricting case. I wrote a piece about this in MSNBC because I poured through Elena King,
Elena Kagan, I think.
Elena Kagan's dissent, which is a tour de force. And she basically makes the point that the decision of the Texas case is like just appalling. And what the court did was, you know, Texas passes this gerrymander. A bunch of progressive groups in Texas sue them over it, arguing that it's a racial gerrymander. District court holds this very quick trial, and they do it quickly. It's because they don't want it to go into next year and interfere with the election. And the district court listens to 9 days of testimony, 23 witnesses, over 3,000 pieces of evidence, and decide, in an opinion written by a Trump-appointed judge, Jeffrey Brown, that there's overwhelming evidence that Texas executed a racial gerrymander, which is unconstitutional. Partisan gerrymanders are fine, but racial gerrymanders are not. So they did this, and there's a 160-page opinion. And the Supreme Court, basically in 2 paragraphs, just dismissed it completely. And Kagan just destroyed that and points out that, this goes against the law and precedent, which says that the Supreme Court is going to, unless there's clear error, which the court did not point out, that they provide significant deference to district court finding a fact. And that's what the district court did find fact that this was racial gerrymander. And they basically ignored the law, ignored the decades of precedents. And they did it for reasons that she wouldn't say it directly, but I think we all know why they did it, because it helps Republicans in Texas. Um, and what's even worse about this decision was that they invoked the Purcell um, uh, precedent, which says
Principle.
the principle, which says you can't interfere in election. You can't interfere. The courts cannot interfere in election too close to the election because it will create, quote, voter confusion. Now, if you're confused by this, since it's December 2025, it's understandable. The election is in 11 months. And yet they said that changing the maps now would create voter confusion.
Because the
Or
filing deadline was
right.
this week.
Keep in mind, that the voters in Texas have voted with the current maps in 22 and in 24. So the voter confusion that's being created is putting in place new maps, which is what Texas is forcing the state to do in order to gain seats, or hopefully gain seats for them. Hopefully for them, that's why they did it. So she points out that if you basically, by that logic, Indiana or Florida, who are considering to redraw their maps, could literally create new maps that include a poll tax or include a literacy test, or any number of Jim Crow tactics that were used by Republicans, or Democrats, actually, I should say, in the South to prevent black people from voting. And the Supreme Court could do nothing about it because the election is too close. Okay, that's basically what they've done. And so now, if you're Florida and Indiana, you can just ignore the Voting Rights Act. You can create a clear racial gerrymander, and the Supreme Court is powerless to stop you. This is one of the most outrageous decisions I've seen in some time, because not only is it just violate past Supreme Court precedent, it violates the law, but it shows what all of us know to be true, that this Supreme Court is a partisan arm of the Republican Party, and they are not interested in the law. They're only interested in helping Republicans. As I wrote this in my piece, said the law is not the law anymore. The law is what helps Republicans. At least that's the view of this court.
I so I think Michael was actually too nice to this decision. I just want to spot like the 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 two judges on the
Sorry.
panel. There was a Democratic appointee on the lower court, and then this judge, Jeff Brown, who wrote this opinion. This is not just a Trump appointee. This is someone who Rick Perry appointed 3 times as a judge in Texas, who won a Republican primary to be a Texas Supreme Court justice. Okay. He is a rock-ribbed conservative. And he found that this was a racial gerrymander and produced reams of evidence. And it's worse than Michael says, because they could have just left this in place and let this play out and heard the appeal and then actually heard oral arguments on it, wrote actual opinions. If you want to overturn it, that's how you do it. Instead, they treated it like some sort of emergency. And the emergency was that the Republican Party was at risk of having 3 or 5 seats taken away from them because their pre-existing gerrymander, by the way, the 2022 map was a gerrymander in and of
Yeah.
itself. Okay. And they would have had to leave that in place. And they violated all their own precedents on this stuff. And the Purcell stuff is extraordinarily dangerous because what it incentivizes is it incentivizes states to move their filing deadlines up so that they can do whatever they want to election law and it can't be changed for the next cycle. That
Yeah.
is the real problem here is you're now saying that the filing deadline that a state arbitrarily chooses, not election day, is what
Right.
governs Purcell. And it was
And
an
by the way,
outrageous
the filing
decision.
deadline for a primary election.
Eh, Yes, and Justice Alito's concurrence, he said, I don't want to write a full opinion because I don't want to hold things up anymore. But he was condescending to Judge Brown too, which was obnoxious in and of itself, especially because Judge Brown, the worst opinion I've ever seen a judge write was Judge Jerry Smith of the Fifth Circuit Court of
Yeah.
Appeals was the dissenter on this panel at the lower court, and he wrote this intemperate
Right.
personal thing screed that shows that it's long past time for him to retire.
Right.
Um, and
Can
this,
I mention one more? No, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I've always been someone who's felt like these justices are more ideologues than partisans, that they are rock-ribbed right-wing nut jobs, and that's what guides them. But as Michael says, I don't think you can look at this and say that anything other than partisan advantage is driving this, because if not, then they would have let this ruling go into place, and they would have heard an appeal and issued a decision, and if that didn't change the map until 2028, so be it. That's the
Ca-
way the process is supposed to work.
Can I just tell you how bad this decision, how bad Alito's concurrence was? Um, he actually said that, no, just let's understand what happened here. The Let's go back a second, and then we're going to go past 3 o'clock. I don't give a shit. This is important. So what happened here is that Trump went to Texas and said, "I want you to rewrite your maps," and Texas said no. And so then, initially said no. And then Justice Department sent this letter to Texas threatening to sue them, claiming that the maps that Republicans had passed in 2020, after the 2020 census, discriminated against white people because it gave too much power to blacks and Hispanics. That's right. Texas Republicans wrote a map that gave too much power to blacks and Republicans and Hispanics. If you believe that, I'm going to sell you a bridge down the block from where I live. Okay? That's utter bullshit.
I hope you get a good price for that bridge.
Very good price. Listen, excellent deal I can give you. So that's what happens. So Texas then does this map, clearly racially gerrymanders the map. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming of this was a racial gerrymander. You can read my piece and see all the different examples of it. I won't get into all of it here, but lots of evidence. Alito says in his concurrence that the plaintiffs, the black and Hispanic groups that brought the lawsuit accusing Texas of racially disenfranchising Hispanic and black voters, they're the partisans because they knew this map wasn't racially gerrymandered. And so all they're trying to do is use the fact that black and Hispanics vote for Democrats as a way to try to undo this map. Not, by the way, the Texas Republicans. They're not the bad guys here, according to Alito. They were acting in good faith. That's what he argues. Which
You have to
basically means,
assume that, he says. He says you have to assume that they were acting in good faith. Why would a judge ever assume that election law, given the
why
history of
would you assume
legislatures
that
operating in
when you
bad
have
faith?
160 fucking page opinion that says that's not true? This is what is so outrageous about it. Is the district court went through the evidence. They talked to the witnesses. They poured through the videos of Abbott speaking, of Texas legislators speaking, and they concluded overwhelmingly that this was a racial gerrymander. And Alito's response is, you should trust Texas Republicans. They were acting in good faith. They said this is a partisan map. You should believe them. It's unfucking believable. It is so dishonest on Alito's part. But of course, he is a fucking hack, so no one should be sorry. I forget
He is.
my temperate language, but I'm getting upset. It's
I
ridiculous.
I can honestly say that there are two people in the world who I dislike more than Donald Trump, and Sam Alito is one of them.
I-
The other
yeah,
one is
who else?
Tucker Carlson. For anyone who would care to know, who apparently said some horribly sexist things about Barry Weiss recently, that just came out, but said she shouldn't be anything more than a secretary. And for a nepo baby
Well,
to
she
say
shouldn't be
that,
president of CBS News, but that's ridiculous to
we
say that
agree
about.
with him on that, but that's about it. But anyway, Alito is he is the worst, most hackish justice. He's just absolutely terrible. He's an awful person, and it's really this opinion was disgraceful. Now
Disgraceful.
a couple of
Not
things
even
that I
opinion, really. It's like a few paragraphs he basically wrote.
right. It made a mockery of the role of the court. And the one thing I will say is that this probably forecloses Democrats gaining seats with new maps in Wisconsin, because Republicans will appeal whatever state courts do to the Supreme Court and say, hey, they violated Purcell. And the Supreme Court say, oh, yes, you can't implement this for this cycle.
So this is the interesting question. What happens to California? Now, the Justice Department has sued California because they claim that their maps disenfranchise white voters. Unbelievable. Now, based on this decision, that DOJ case should be dead. In fact, the California lawyers
Alito's
asked for, and Alito, interestingly enough, referenced the California case, which I saw as a tell that he is basically saying we're not going to interfere in these cases. That's what's really going on here. We're not going to interfere in Texas, but that means we're also not going to interfere in California, which I guess is sort of a wash. Now, do I believe that if the California case gets to the Supreme Court, it will automatically be dismissed on the same grounds the Texas district order was dismissed? No, I don't. And why? because the Supreme Court consists of a bunch of partisan hacks. So theoretically, California should be safe. We'll see. I view this decision more as a signal to Virginia, I'm not Virginia, excuse me, to Florida and to Indiana that they should go ahead and they should rewrite these maps and that they should do it in the most racially gerrymandered way possible, and the court will do nothing to stop you. That's how I read it. Now, will it happen? I don't know. Indiana, it does seem as though they don't have the votes in the Senate. Republicans don't have the votes to pass a redistricting plan, but this might
They're going
embolden
to vote
Florida.
on it tomorrow. They are voting tomorrow, and it's unclear as to whether or not they have the votes. Everyone's being very coy. They may not have the votes. So that's something to watch tomorrow. I absolutely think that's the message of Florida. And what's going on in Florida, real briefly, is that Ron DeSantis wants to string this out into like April or May because he's hoping that the Supreme Court Voting Rights Act decision comes down and frees them to like obliterate all of the Democrats in the Florida delegation. That is his hope here. And a lot of Trump strategists just did some event where they said, "Look, the Supreme Court's going to hand this decision down. And it's going to be like a gift to us." But there's a real question of timing on that. But Florida is almost certainly going to move forward. And
I don't know.
main
I mean,
limit,
we'll see. I'm not convinced that's going to happen in Florida.
I think they're going to do something, but I do think that there are some real limitations given the fact that they have to worry about if we lose those Latino voters in South Florida. If we overextend, we could have this whole thing blow up on us. There's one or two seats they can steal in like Tampa and Orlando, I think. But beyond that, they may not be able to go as far as they want to go.
But the flip side is Virginia should have carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want because
That's right.
even if there's a court challenge,
The
again,
the
based on what
only question with Virginia is where they try to draw a 10-1 map or a 9-2. A 9-2 would be 9 safe seats. A 10-1, there would be some real risk, not in 2026, but in a bad cycle.
yeah. All right, listen, I gotta go. This
Yeah,
was
you gotta
awesome.
go.
Thank you. I'm sorry we had a really passionate argument about Joe Manchin and the Democratic Party. That was great. I may go back and watch that again to get some ideas for something I'm working on. Brian, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Love
It
talking to you.
is absolutely a pleasure. Tune in next week. We will
Thanks to everyone who yeah. Thanks to everyone who joined us. You guys are awesome.
we haven't talked about what we're going to do beyond next week yet. Whether next week will be it for the year, where we're going to do a Christmas Eve special of the two Jews.
Two
You
G's
know,
Christmas Eve. I love it. I love it.
so but
That's what
take care of
that's we
yourselves
you too. Yeah, and
and
everyone here who was on today, thank you for sticking with us. 210 of you, and
subscribe. Subscribe to
subscribe
both of us.
to both of us.
Truth or
And buy
Consequences and The World According to Brian.
and check out Catherine Rye Jewell's book, Life in the Underground, about college radio.
Yeah. Man, if we're gonna start selling academic books next week, I got a bunch of stuff to hawk.
I mean, you can buy
I'll break
my
out
book
the
too if you want
copies
to.
of my book right over there. Some of your
There you go.
books.
Mine's over here somewhere. I think it's right up there.
Hey, hey, if anybody out there wants to buy our books, we'll figure out a way to like sign them or something for holiday gifts. They make great presents.
Great presents. The best present ever. Best present ever. All right, Brian.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
man.
your attention to this matter.
Thank you for changing this matter. See you next week. Bye
Take
bye.
care.